Tonight's first order of business, how a plunging price of oil could be the best thing that's happened to Canadians in a long time. Of course, it does mean a dramatic drop in government revenue, and of course, our petrocurrency may stay weak for as long as oil prices stay low. So what's so great about the falling price? Well, if nothing else, it's a reminder to Canadians we may need a plan B, that governments and workers alike could one day be staring down the barrel of an economy that can't sustain itself solely on one commodity, that one day could well be down the road, or it could be one big innovation in alternative energy away. For now, we remain a nation with a lot of our eggs in one basket. Welcome to The Exchange. Here's a closer look at what's happening to oil prices and what it means for Canada. Goldman Sachs predicts West Texas oil could be as low as $75 a barrel at the start of next year, $15 less than its previous target. It says Brent crude will take a similar dive down to $85 a barrel in the second quarter. Goldman thinks oil prices will drop further, as low as $70 for West Texas and $80 for Brent. The increased weakness, according to Goldman, flows from ramped-up production in non-OPEC countries. Brazil is one of the culprits. The new rising oil powers drilling in the Gulf of Mexico is also picking up. But it's the U.S. shale boom that's really making a difference here. From 2005 to 2006, the U.S. imported more than 10 million barrels a day. But with new domestic sources online, the U.S. imports about 7 million barrels. OPEC is countering the shale threat by letting prices fall, trying to squeeze out the new American producers. Goldman sees that as a continuing trend. It says any near-term OPEC production cut will be modest until there is sufficient evidence of a slowdown in U.S. shale oil production growth. Canadian oil producers are also aware of the trend, and they're acting accordingly. In a recent conference call, the president and CEO of Husky Energy said his firm is taking steps to weatherproof the business in the face of falling oil prices. Now, even if individual Canadian oil producers can weather the storm, what does that mean for the whole economy? Well, a lot. One new analysis sounded the alarm on GDP today. Capital Economics said the slump in oil prices couldn't have come at a worse time for Canada. It expects Canadian oil producers to lose $2.5 billion per year at recent prices. That's 0.2% of GDP. Capital Economics is trimming growth forecasts accordingly, now predicting just 2% growth in 2015. Peter Armstrong joins us now. We've known, obviously, that falling oil prices will have an effect. First of all, I found it really interesting to see those new lower targets. As you breach that kind of $80 level a barrel, which is seen as a key level, to have an influential player like Goldman say, look for it to fall even further, and in some cases into places that are starting to look uneconomical. Well,
yes, like 75 is sort of where they say it could hit, but then dip as low, as you said, to 70.
Right.
That's where you're getting into real trouble, because you're hitting the sort of marginal cost of what it actually costs to produce the oil. They say it's anywhere between 60 and 80, but if you get below 70, you're into real trouble.
And so we saw the Capital Economics report about the effect on our economy.
Yeah.
It's a big effect for governments. So we're going to have to start seeing sort of a thoughtfulness about deficits, debt reduction, what governments are expecting to get, because most of the internal gauges for what they're going to get are based on much higher prices of oil.
Yeah, like $97, $95, stuff they're nowhere near right now. And you've talked about this many times before. The policymakers need a plan, that if this doesn't pan out, what are you going to do? And I talked to Dave Mandani from Capital Economics about this report. And he's like, look, it'll shave, a couple of points, 0.2% off GDP, which is big. But he says there is a silver lining in this, that the global growth you'll see some growth in that we haven't seen because of the drop in oil, and that might be something that can boost the Canadian economy, and that there will be a bit of a crossfade there, that as manufacturing picks up, oil prices drop off. Like we're seeing gas prices drop today. I was talking to somebody in Edmonton, loonie a liter for gas. So people will be happy about that. What does it mean for the economy at large? We still don't really know. Yeah,
in fact, we're talking about the kind of new renaissance in manufacturing coming up in the show in the U.S., partly driven by that cheaper energy cost related to shale gas. That's all well and good. But as you say, when you are an economy that does rely so heavily as we do on this two sectors, oil and gas, when you talk about the number of projects that stop being economical, right around $80, we've seen oil drop below that. It could happen again, given what's happening in the U.S., and that OPEC doesn't seem to be worried about pumping out oil despite the fact that the price is low.
Listen, OPEC's watching this and saying, we're just going to keep market share. The fact is, they're happy to see a couple of the smaller producers of shale oil and the frackers in the U.S. drop out of this
disappear altogether.
They simply can't keep up with the price. The Saudis can ride that out. Some independent operator in sort of northwestern United States can't.
So there is, though, you pointed out one silver lining. There's the global growth story, right? Suddenly you get sort of cheaper energy energy costs. That'll fuel some growth that we might not have seen. What about the consumer piece of it? Does that outweigh, in Canada, can we make the case that, you know, we're going to see inflation pressures come off, we're going to see real costs for individuals and, you know, home heating and at the pump?
And that's just it. I mean, the neat part of this is the nexus that sort of oil prices really are. They sort of, you can hold them over every part of the economy and take a look at it. It's the dipstick. And in a lot of ways, you know, the capital economics is saying 0.5% off inflation.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's gas prices, it's heating prices heading into what they say is going to be another very cold winter. All of these things for Canadian consumers are good. And so long as they're right that this sort of balances itself out, that it's a small shift in GDP, but not a big, you know, too big of a deal, then that's fine.
Yeah.
The problem is that's at prices now. The Capital Economics Report is not sort of projecting the Goldman Sachs, what happens at 75, what happens at 70. If it goes below 75, I think that's when you start to get into some.
And this really does. What's interesting to me, Peter, is this is such an post-OPEC world. I mean, the idea that you could have a cartel that controlled the price and said, hey, guys, let's drop production because the price is falling, and when the price gets back up, we'll open up the taps again. It's over, right?
It's done. And you know, the United States, the amount that's being, it's like an extra 3 million barrels. 3 million.
Yeah.
It's insane how much is going on in the States. And when you look at that, even just 10 or 12 years ago, the market share of OPEC has just, it's disintegrated underfoot. And the relationship of the world and global growth to oil prices is shifting with them.
And we talk about the economic effect on us of falling oil price for OPEC countries. That's going to be talk about all the eggs in one basket.
OPEC prices for Russia, for Venezuela. There's a lot of countries that have a lot of money that are simply tied into oil, and if it's not that, they have no plan B.
Thanks, Peter.
You bet.